The Diablos MC thought they'd found an easy target when they circled Eleanor Steel Wheels Lewis's truck, laughing at the grandma driver and eyeing her rig. What they didn't know was that Eleanor's late son had served with special forces, and she still had connections no one dared cross. Now, as she quietly made one call, a network of loyal warriors was already moving. The morning sun cast long shadows across the truck stop as Eleanor Steel Wheels Lewis completed her pre-trip inspection with methodical precision. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking tire pressure, brake lines, and connection points despite the arthritis that had settled into her joints decades ago. 90 years old and still hauling. A living legend on 18 wheels, Max, her German shepherd, maintained vigilant watch from beside the massive Peterbilt's front bumper. Not a pet, a partner. His alert posture betrayed his specialized training, a final gift from Eleanor's late son, Michael, before his deployment with the 5th Special Forces Group had ended in sacrifice rather than homecoming. "Looking good as always, Steel Wheels," called Jimmy from the fuel desk. "Not many rigs get that kind of attention anymore." Eleanor nodded without breaking her inspection rhythm. "Truck deserves respect, Jimmy. Carried me over 5 million miles. That's to the moon and back 10 times. Her Peterbilt 389 appeared mostly standard to casual observers, classic lines, deep burgundy paint with subtle silver detailing. Only those who knew what to look for would notice the reinforced bumpers, specialized locking systems, and custom cabin modifications that accommodated her age, while sacrificing none of her effectiveness. "Coffee's fresh," Jimmy added. "Your usual." Corner tables open. Eleanor completed her final checks before straightening up with remarkable spryness for her age. Standing barely 5'3", her slight frame belied the strength that had allowed her to handle 20-ton rigs since 1949. First for the Women's Army Corps during Korea, then for commercial carriers across 7 decades. "Come on, Max," she said quietly. The shepherd fell into perfect heel position, moving with the disciplined precision that distinguished military-trained dogs from pets. Inside the diner, conversations briefly paused as she entered. Not from disrespect, but reverence. Eleanor Lewis. He had been hauling freight before most of these drivers were born. Her nickname, earned not from her grey hair, but from her unbreakable resolve in the face of everything from blizzards to hijackers. Her usual corner table afforded clear sight lines to all entrances and the parking lot beyond. Another habit from decades on roads where a woman alone needed constant situational awareness. "Morning, Eleanor." "The usual." Diana, the waitress, approached with coffee already pouring. "Thank you, dear." Eleanor's eyes tracked the movement of 3 motorcycles cruising slowly through the parking lot. Leather cuts with patches she didn't recognize. Diablos MC, according to the back emblem. New to this territory, Max's ears shifted slightly forward, tracking the biker's engine sounds with focused attention. "New faces?" Eleanor asked casually, nodding toward the window. Diana's expression tightened. "Showed up last week. Bad news. They've been asking questions about shipping schedules." Eleanor absorbed this information while watching the bikers circle her truck with too much interest. Their body language told a story to those who knew how to read it. Evaluation. Assessment. "Planning? They giving you trouble?" Sheriff Cooper slid into the opposite seat, coffee mug in hand. Weekly ritual when Eleanor passed through his jurisdiction. Not yet. Her tone made clear she expected that to change. "Don't go looking for it, Eleanor," Cooper cautioned. "These boys aren't like the road trash you handled back in the day. They're organized. Dangerous." Eleanor sipped her coffee, eyes never leaving the bikers as they finally parked and entered the truck stop. "I've been handling dangerous since before your daddy had a badge, Thomas Cooper." Max shifted position beneath the table, invisible to casual observation but perfectly placed to respond if needed. The dog's training allowed him to assess threats with uncanny accuracy. The bikers settled at the counter, 3 men with the hard eyes of predators identifying prey. Their glances toward Eleanor carried dismissive amusement. Just an old woman with a dog. Perfect. Eleanor's manifest showed medical supplies bound for Children's Memorial in Phoenix. Time-sensitive treatments for kids with conditions that wouldn't. Wait, she'd never missed a delivery in 70 years of driving. Wasn't about to start now. Her gnarled fingers brushed the ancient flip phone tucked inside her jacket. The number she'd promised Michael she would call if real trouble found her. The connection she'd never used, not even when the hijackers hit her in '94, or when the tornado flipped her rig in '05. Some promises were meant to be kept until absolutely necessary. Heading out in 15, she told Cooper quietly. Phoenix Run, medical supplies. The sheriff nodded. I'll clear your path to the county line. Eleanor's lips twitched in the ghost of a smile. Appreciate it. But Max and I can handle ourselves. The bikers paid their bill and exited, their predatory gazes lingering on Eleanor's truck. Measuring, calculating. Safe roads, steel wheels, Diana said, refilling her coffee. Eleanor nodded, watching the bikers mount up and pull away. Not leaving, and positioning, setting the stage for whatever came next. Always are, she replied calmly. Until they're not. The Arizona highway stretched before Eleanor's Peterbilt like a ribbon of heat-warped promise. 4 hours into her run, the landscape had transformed from scrubland to red rock formations that stood like ancient sentinels against the cloudless sky. Max maintained his vigilant position in the custom co-pilot seat, modified to give him stability. During long hauls, while allowing full visibility, Eleanor's eyes flicked to her mirrors with practiced precision. The same 3 motorcycles had appeared for the 3rd time since leaving the truck stop, always at a distance, always just long enough to be spotted before falling back. They're not even trying to be subtle, Max, she muttered, adjusting her route guidance system. The shepherd's ears pricked forward, his posture conveying understanding that went beyond normal canine intelligence. Michael had selected him from the same breeding program that supplied elite military K9 units, training him for 2 years before entrusting him to Eleanor's care. Rest stop ahead, Eleanor noted, checking her logbook. The mandatory break would play into their hands, but regulations were regulations, even for 90-year-old legends. The Desert Vista rest area appeared largely empty when Eleanor guided her rig into the truck parking section. Standard procedure. Back in for quick departure if needed. The practiced maneuver looked effortless, belying the strength required to handle the massive steering wheel without power assistance. Perimeter check, she told Max quietly. The shepherd slipped from the cab with fluid grace, moving in a precise pattern around the truck that appeared random to casual observers but provided maximum surveillance coverage. Eleanor watched through her mirrors as Max completed his circuit, noting how his behavior changed when he reached the rear of the trailer. Subtle tension in his shoulders, ears shifting to tracking position. Something had caught his attention. Eleanor exited the cab with deliberate care, using the handle grips Michael had installed years ago when arthritis first began claiming her joints. To observers, she looked like a fragile old woman climbing down from a truck too powerful for her aged frame. The fading bruises on her forearms from subduing a would-be hijacker last month suggested otherwise. Max circled back, brushing against her leg in a specific pattern. The signal was clear. Someone had tampered with the rig. "Show me," she commanded softly. The shepherd led her to the rear axle assembly, where Eleanor knelt, groaning for the benefit of anyone watching. Her fingers found it immediately, a magnetic tracking device nestled against the brake line. Military grade, not the cheap GPS units amateurs used. "Getting sophisticated," she murmured, leaving the device in place. "Better to know you're being tracked than to alert them to your awareness." The distant rumble of motorcycles confirmed her suspicions. The Diablos were maintaining surveillance, coordinating with whoever had planted the tracker. This wasn't opportunistic. It was planned, organized, and specifically targeting her shipment. Eleanor completed her mandatory rest period, performing stretches that maintained her remarkable flexibility while watching the highway through mirrored sunglasses. Two more motorcycles passed, different riders but the same club patches. They were cycling surveillance teams, professional procedure. Back in the cab, Eleanor checked her secured satellite phone, a gift from Michael's unit after his death. The display showed 3 more medical transport trucks had been hit in the past month across the southwest. All drivers over 60, all carrying high-value pharmaceuticals. They're targeting older drivers, she told Max as she secured her seatbelt, figuring we can't fight back. Max's low growl conveyed his opinion. On that assessment, 50 miles later, Eleanor pulled into the Lone Wolf Truck Plaza for fuel. The facility's security cameras and well-lit layout made it safer than most stops. As she began refueling, a black pickup with Diablos MC members parked nearby, watching with predatory intent, barely disguised as casual interest. "Miss, you need help with that pump?" One of the bikers approached, his tone falsely solicitous. "Looks mighty heavy for someone your age." Eleanor fixed him with a steady gaze that had stared down greater threats across 7 decades of driving. "I was pumping diesel when your mama was still changing your diapers, young man." The biker's friendly facade slipped, revealing the hardness beneath. "Just trying to help, Grandma. Roads can be dangerous for someone vulnerable." The threat hung in the air between them. "Indeed they can," Eleanor agreed pleasantly. "Fortunately, I'm not someone vulnerable." Max appeared around the front of the truck, his posture communicating more than growls ever could. Military bearing, combat readiness, focused intent. The biker reassessed, taking an involuntary step backward. "Nice dog. Shame if something happened to him. Shame indeed," Eleanor replied, her voice dropping to a register that had stopped bar fights in the 1960s. "For whoever tried." Inside the truck plaza, Eleanor spotted a familiar face. Dave Henderson, Arizona Highway Patrol, grabbing coffee on his break. Their eyes met briefly across the store. Eleanor gave a subtle nod toward the bikers outside. "Steel wheels," Henderson acknowledged when she reached the register. "Trouble with those gentlemen?" "Nothing I can't handle," Eleanor replied, paying for her fuel. "But they've been following since the state line, likely planning something near Coyote Pass." The narrow canyon was perfect for an ambush. Limited visibility, no escape routes, minimal traffic. "I could escort you," Henderson offered. Eleanor shook her head. "They'd just wait for another opportunity. Better to know what we're dealing with." Back in her truck, Eleanor checked her manifest again. The medical supplies she carried were due at Children's Memorial by tomorrow morning. Treatments for kids who had no time to wait for replacement shipments. "We're delivering on schedule, Max," she told the shepherd firmly, "no matter what." The satellite phone displayed another alert. Truck hijacked near Flagstaff. Driver hospitalized. The pattern was accelerating. Eleanor started her engine. The E-Dual, powerful diesel, rumbling to life with well-maintained precision. The Diablos members mounted their bikes, maintaining casual postures that didn't match the predatory intent in their eyes. "They'll make their move by nightfall," she assessed aloud, checking her special modifications. "All systems operational as..." She pulled back onto the highway. Eleanor's weathered hand brushed against the ancient flip phone, carrying the number she'd promised only to use in dire circumstances. Not yet, but soon, perhaps. Max settled into alert watch position, his training evident in every muscle. The shepherd understood what was coming better than the bikers did. The hunters believed they'd chosen their prey wisely. An elderly woman, alone, on dangerous roads. They had no idea what they were actually pursuing. The afternoon sun hung low over the western mountains as Eleanor guided her Peterbilt into the Blue Mesa truck haven. This stop hadn't been on her original route plan, but tactical assessment required better intelligence. 6 other long haulers were parked in the sprawling lot, their drivers gathered in the diner section, sharing road stories and warnings. Perfect information-gathering environment. "Guard," Eleanor instructed Max quietly as she secured the cab. The shepherd immediately shifted to protection mode, his posture conveying clear warning to anyone approaching the vehicle while she was absent. Inside the truck haven, conversations paused briefly as Eleanor entered. Her reputation preceded her. Steel Wheels Lewis was a legend among career drivers. She nodded acknowledgement to familiar faces before taking a strategic seat at the counter where conversations flowed most freely. "Thought you'd be halfway to Phoenix by now, Eleanor," remarked Sadie, the veteran waitress who'd served this stop for 20 years. "Taking the scenic route today," Eleanor replied, accepting the coffee Sadie poured without asking. "Heard there might be trouble around Coyote Pass." The comment dropped like a stone in still water, creating ripples of reaction among the nearby drivers. Information gathering was about watching responses, not just hearing answers. "Diablos," muttered Roy Jenkins, a livestock hauler with 30 years' experience. "Hit Carson's rig Tuesday night, broke both his arms when he resisted. Third one this month," added another driver. "All older guys, all carrying farmer or medical. They're targeting specific loads." Eleanor sipped her coffee, absorbing details while appearing merely concerned. "They working alone?" "Not likely," said a voice from behind her. Eleanor turned to see Marcus Washington, former Marine turned independent hauler. "Their patterns are too precise. They know exact routes, exact cargoes. Someone's feeding them manifests." The implications settled heavily. Inside information meant the threat was more sophisticated than standard highway pirates. "They hit a Phoenix-bound medical transport yesterday," Marcus continued, sliding onto the stool beside her. "Driver was 68, former military like you. Fought back hard enough that they had to change tactics." "How so?" Eleanor asked, though she suspected the answer. "Shot out his tires first, disabled the rig before approaching." Marcus lowered his voice. "They're adapting, Eleanor. Getting smarter." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Tactical evolution indicated experience and leadership, concerning developments for predators on wheels. The diner's windows reflected movement in the parking lot. 3 motorcycles cruising slowly past the parked trucks, their riders taking particular interest in her distinctive Peterbilt. "Your admirers are back," Marcus observed. "Seems I'm popular today," Eleanor replied, her tone conveying more than her words. Sadie leaned across the counter, voice dropping to a whisper. "Sheriff found 2 of their spotters at the dispatch office in Flagstaff yesterday. They had computer access, shipping manifests. They know exactly what you're carrying, Eleanor." "Children's hospital supplies," Eleanor confirmed. "Time sensitive. Treatments, high street value too," Marcus added grimly. "Those medications would bring $500,000 on the black market." The diner's radio suddenly crackled with an emergency transmission. Another truck hit near Cooper Ridge, driver critically injured. The 3rd attack in 5 days. "They're getting bolder," Roy observed. "Used to be they'd avoid violence if possible. New leadership," Marcus explained. "Guy called Viper took over their Arizona chapter last month. Ex-military, dishonorable discharge. Runs them like a tactical unit now." Eleanor processed this information, updating her threat assessment. Military background explained the sophisticated surveillance and tracking methods. The violence escalation suggested a leader with something to prove. "They'll hit near Coyote Pass," she predicted, standing and leaving money for her coffee. "Narrow roads, no cell service, limited escape options." "You're not still going that route?" Sadie asked, alarm evident in her voice. Eleanor's weathered face revealed nothing. "My shipment needs to reach those children by morning." "Highway Patrol could escort you," Marcus suggested, "and lose the chance to end this?" Eleanor replied quietly. "They'll just find another victim, another driver who might not be prepared." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. He'd served in combat zones. He recognized the tactical assessment of someone planning countermeasures rather than evasion. Outside, Eleanor checked her truck thoroughly, noting new scratches near the 5th. A wheel where someone had examined her rig's connection points. Max maintained perfect vigilance, his training allowing him to track multiple potential threats simultaneously. Found something? She asked when the shepherd focused on the trailer's undercarriage. Eleanor knelt with practiced ease despite her age, fingers finding a second tracking device, newer, more sophisticated than the first. She left it in place, but activated a signal jammer concealed within her truck's chassis, designed to create false positioning data rather than blocking the signal entirely. Let them think they still had the advantage. Back in the cab, Eleanor conducted a thorough pre-departure check of her special modifications. The reinforced locking system engaged smoothly. The specialized communications equipment showed green status. The compressed air systems Michael had installed beneath innocent-looking panels remained fully charged. She studied her route map, identifying potential ambush points and calculating response options. The Diablos would choose terrain that favored their superior numbers and maneuverability, likely the narrowest section of Coyote Pass, 3 hours ahead at her current pace. They'll have at least 8 riders, she told Max as the big diesel engine rumbled to life. Probably block the road, force us to stop, then approach from multiple angles. The shepherd's alert posture conveyed understanding. His specialized training included response protocols for exactly these scenarios. Eleanor guided her truck back onto the highway, maintaining precisely the speed limit. Her satellite phone displayed the positions of other medical transports in the region, all rerouted due to the Diablos' threat. All except hers. As darkness fell across the Arizona desert, Eleanor Lewis drove steadily toward Coyote Pass, her aged hands sure on the wheel. In her pocket, the old flip phone remained silent, its single program number still unused. Not yet, but soon. Through the windshield, distant headlights appeared on the horizon. Motorcycles moving into position, thinking themselves invisible. In the gathering dark, they had no idea who they were truly pursuing. The winding approach to Coyote Pass loomed ahead, moonlight casting ghostly shadows across the rugged terrain. Eleanor guided her Peterbilt with the precision born from millions of miles behind the wheel, her eyes constantly scanning for the threat she knew was coming. Max sat fully alert beside her, his ears tracking sounds beyond human perception. "There, they are," Eleanor murmured, spotting the stage scene before her headlights fully illuminated it. A motorcycle lay across the narrow road, its rider waving frantically for assistance. 2 more bikes were parked nearby, their riders appearing to help their stranded companion. The oldest trick in the highway predator playbook, but effective against unsuspecting drivers. Eleanor slowed her rig methodically, not suddenly enough to signal awareness of the trap, but gradually, as any concerned driver would. Her weathered hands moved with subtle purpose, activating hidden switches beneath her dashboard that engaged specialized systems throughout the truck. "Ready, Max," she said quietly. The shepherd's posture shifted to combat readiness, his training overriding any instinct to bark or growl. Silent efficiency was what made military dogs lethal. Eleanor brought the massive truck to a complete stop 50 feet from the staged breakdown. Close enough to appear helpful, far enough to maintain tactical advantage. Her headlights illuminated. The scene fully now, 3 Diablos members trying to appear unthreatening, despite the tension in their postures. "You need help?" Eleanor called through her partially opened window, projecting frail concern in her voice, while her eyes tracked the positions of each man. The apparent leader approached, a tall man with a shaved head and elaborate neck tattoos. "Bike through a chain. You got any tools, ma'am?" "I might have something," Eleanor replied, maintaining the appearance of an unsuspecting elderly woman. "Let me check." As she made a show of reaching for her door, Eleanor spotted the 4th and 5th men emerging from the scrub brush beside the road. Their hands held objects that glinted in the moonlight, not guns, but heavy batons designed to shatter truck windows. "Get that door open," the leader ordered, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "We'll take it from here, Grandma." Eleanor sighed, the sound carrying genuine disappointment rather than fear. You boys really should have done your homework. Her door remained closed, the specialized locking system engaging with a heavy thunk that surprised the approaching Diablos. Through her side mirror, Eleanor spotted 2 more motorcycles arriving, reinforcements positioning behind her rig to block retreat. "Last chance, old woman," the leader growled, brandishing what now clearly showed as a tire iron. "Open up, or we open it for you." Max remained perfectly still beside Eleanor, awaiting her command. The discipline shown was beyond ordinary canine training. This was specialized military protocol in action. "You know what I'm carrying," Eleanor stated, her voice suddenly dropping the fragile elderly tone, revealing steel underneath. "You know these supplies are for children who will die without them." "Not our problem," the leader replied, signaling his men to surround the truck. "Just business, nothing personal." "That's where you're wrong," Eleanor said, reaching slowly. Beneath her seat, "When you threaten these deliveries, it becomes very personal." The leader smashed his tire iron against her driver's side window, expecting it to shatter. Instead, the specialized polycarbonate material absorbed the impact with only a slight flexing. His surprise gave Eleanor the moment she needed. "Max, defend!" she commanded. The shepherd lunged across the cab toward the passenger window, which Eleanor had silently lowered halfway during the confrontation. Max cleared the opening with military precision, a silent blur of muscle and training that caught the nearest Diablo completely unprepared. 80 pounds of combat-trained dog struck, with calculated force, targeting the man's weapon arm rather than his throat, disabling without killing. The biker went down hard, screaming in shock as Max immediately disengaged and circled, positioning himself between the remaining threats and Eleanor's door. The leader backed away, genuine fear replacing his earlier confidence. "What the hell? Unkind of dog is that?" Eleanor used the distraction to engage her truck's defensive measures. Reinforced shields deployed over vulnerable areas, and pressurized air nozzles emerged from concealed panels. With a precise tap on her control panel, bursts of compressed air hit 2 approaching bikers with enough force to send them sprawling. "The kind of dog you shouldn't have provoked," Eleanor answered, finally opening her door and descending from the cab with remarkable agility for her 90 years. The Diablos regrouped quickly, their remaining members circling with more caution. Now, 7 of them against 1 elderly woman and her dog. The odds still favored them, and their expressions showed they knew it. "You've got spirit, Grandma," the leader acknowledged, producing a handgun from his jacket. "But this isn't going to end well for you." Eleanor stood calmly beside her truck, her posture betraying decades of hard-earned confidence. Max positioned himself precisely at her side, a tactical placement rather than a fearful one. "I've been driving these roads since before your father was born," Eleanor told him, her voice carrying clearly in the desert night. "I've handled hijackers in 5 decades, truckers with no respect for women drivers, smugglers, thieves, even a few killers." She reached slowly into her jacket pocket, drawing out the ancient flip phone. "But you boys," she continued, "you're making me do something I promised only to use in the direst circumstances." The leader laughed, genuinely amused. "You calling for help, Grandma? Out here? No cell service for 20 miles. Eleanor smiled slightly as she flipped open the phone. "This doesn't need cell service." She pressed a single button, activating the connection that had remained unused for years. The phone emitted a simple beep, confirmation of a message sent. "You just made a serious mistake," Eleanor informed them as she pocketed the phone again. "Not threatening me, not threatening my shipment." Her eyes hardened as she gestured toward Max, who stood combat-ready beside her. "Your mistake was making me call in the only favor I've ever asked of my son's unit." The Diablo's leader, Viper, according to the patch on his cut, regained his composure quickly, gesturing for his men to tighten their circle around Eleanor and Max. The desert night had grown completely dark now, the only illumination coming from Eleanor's truck headlights and the distant moon. "Nice story, Grandma," Viper sneered, keeping his pistol trained on her. "But we both know no one's coming. Not for hours, anyway." He glanced at his watch theatrically. "By then, we'll be long gone with your cargo." Eleanor maintained her position, beside the truck's massive front tire, her weathered face revealing nothing. Max stayed precisely at her side, his muscle tension visible only to those who understood canine combat stances. "You still don't understand what you're dealing with," she replied calmly. Viper signaled to his men, who began to spread out in a practiced formation. "We understand plenty. You've got some tricks in that fancy truck. Your dog's got some training. Impressive for an old lady." Two Diablos approached the rear of the trailer, carrying bolt cutters for the locks. Three more circled toward the cab, weapons ready. Professional coordination that confirmed Marcus's intelligence about Viper's military background. "That's a Phoenix Children's Hospital shipment," Eleanor stated, her voice carrying steel beneath the apparent frailty. "Specialized medications for kids with terminal conditions. Worth about $500,000 on the street," Viper confirmed without a hint of remorse. "Business is business." Eleanor didn't move as the bikers continued their approach. Max remained likewise still, though his focused attention tracked every threat precisely. "Last chance to walk away," she offered. Viper's laugh was joined by his men's. "You're the one who should be begging to walk away, Steel Wheels." The use of her nickname confirmed Eleanor's suspicion. The Diablos had done their research, though. "Clearly not thoroughly enough. I never beg," she replied simply. The first Diablo reached for the truck's door, intending to climb into the cab. That's when Eleanor activated the second phase of her truck's defense systems. From concealed panels along the vehicle's sides, high-intensity lights suddenly blazed to life, temporarily blinding the approaching bikers. Simultaneously, the truck's air horns blasted at a frequency designed to disorient rather than merely alert. "Max, contain!" Eleanor commanded. The Shepherd launched into action with military precision, targeting the nearest armed Diablo, not attacking to maim, but executing a tactical containment maneuver that sent the man sprawling, his weapon clattering across the pavement. Eleanor herself moved with surprising speed for her age, reaching the nearest biker before he could recover from the sensory assault. Her gnarled hands found pressure points with practiced efficiency, another skill from decades on dangerous roads. "What the hell?" Viper shouted, firing a wild shot that pinged off the truck's reinforced body panel. The situation devolved into chaos as the Diablos struggled to regroup. Their coordinated approach fractured under Eleanor's defensive measures, each element designed to create maximum disorientation with minimum permanent damage. But Viper adapted quickly, his military training evident in how he recovered. "Ignore the lights, breach the trailer." Four Diablos regrouped and charged the trailer's rear doors, determined to access the valuable cargo. Eleanor watched calmly as they reached the locks, bolt cutters raised. The explosion of purple dye and acrid smoke from the security system Michael had installed caught them completely unprepared. Non-toxic but overwhelming, the compound covered the men in indelible colorant while making breathing nearly impossible. "She's got the whole damn truck booby-trapped," one of them choked out, stumbling away blind. Eleanor turned her attention to Viper, who had maintained enough distance to avoid the worst effects. His expression had transformed from confidence to fury as his carefully planned operation unraveled. "You're dead, old woman," he snarled, raising his gun with deadly intent. The bullet would have struck Eleanor directly if Max hadn't anticipated the threat. The Shepherd slammed into her side with calculated force, knocking her behind the trucks. Massive tire as the shot cracked through the night air. "Kill the dog," Viper ordered, firing again as Max circled with tactical precision. Eleanor used the truck's chassis for cover, moving toward the cab with the practiced low profile of someone who understood ballistics. Her hand reached for the hidden compartment, beneath the step panel, retrieving something she hadn't needed to use in nearly a decade. The sound of screeching tires announced the arrival of more Diablo's reinforcements, a pickup truck carrying at least 5 more members. The odds were worsening by the second. "Breach the cab," Viper commanded his reinforcements. "Get this truck moving." Two Diablos managed to climb onto the truck's running board, one wielding a heavy hammer against the passenger window. The specialized glass held for 3 impacts before starting to spiderweb with cracks. Eleanor reached the driver's side door just as the glass finally shattered on the opposite side. Max continued to hold the ground forces at bay, his military training allowing him to strategically engage multiple threats without sustaining injury. "Max, retreat!" Eleanor called out, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect across 7 decades of trucking. The shepherd immediately disengaged from his current target and made a tactical withdrawal toward Eleanor's position, evading 2 Diablos who tried to intercept him. As Max rejoined her, Eleanor activated the truck's final defensive measure, a specialized locking system that sealed the cab entirely, reinforced shutters dropping over the broken window. But she wasn't fast. Enough! A bullet caught her upper arm, tearing through jacket and flesh with burning intensity. Blood immediately soaked her sleeve as she pulled herself into the cab with Max. Viper appeared at her door, his face contorted with rage as he fired again, this round deflecting off the reinforced door panel. "You can't hide in there forever, Grandma," he shouted. "We've got all night." Inside the cab, Eleanor pressed a hand against her bleeding arm, her breathing controlled despite the pain. Max positioned himself protectively beside her, alert for any breach in their defenses. "They're right about one thing, Max," she said quietly, reaching again for the ancient flip phone. "We don't have all night. Those medications need to reach Phoenix by morning." She pressed the second button sequence, the emergency protocol Michael had made her memorize years ago. "Situation critical," she spoke into the phone. "Medical cargo priority 1. Multiple armed hostiles." Outside, Viper organized his remaining forces for a coordinated assault on the truck, unaware that Eleanor's seemingly futile call had activated a response beyond anything he could imagine. Through her blood-smeared side mirror, Eleanor spotted distant headlights approaching from both directions, vehicles moving at high speed without running lights. "Too late, boys," she whispered. "They're already here." Blood seeped between Eleanor's fingers as she maintained pressure on her wounded arm. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed bone, a flesh wound to someone who'd survived worse injuries. Over decades on dangerous roads, Max pressed against her leg, his training allowing him to balance protection with medical awareness. Outside, Viper coordinated a renewed assault on the truck. 3 Diablos attacked the driver's side with heavy tools, while others attempted to breach the trailer again. Their frustration manifested in increasingly desperate measures. "They don't understand what they've walked into," Eleanor told Max, reaching for the medical kit secured beneath her seat. Military grade, another gift from Michael's unit. A thunderous impact rocked the truck as one biker used a sledgehammer against the door. The reinforced panels held, but Eleanor knew they wouldn't withstand sustained attack forever. The specialized modifications had limits, designed to buy time, not provide absolute protection. "Get something bigger," Viper shouted outside. "We need to get into this cab now." 2 Diablos ran to their pickup, returning with what appeared to be an acetylene torch, cutting equipment that could eventually breach even reinforced steel. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Eleanor efficiently bandaged her arm, her movements practiced despite the pain. She'd patched herself up in worse situations, like the hijacking attempt outside Albuquerque in '87, or the fuel station robbery in '95 that left her with a knife wound and 3 unconscious attackers. "Running out of options, Max," she acknowledged, checking her side mirrors. The distant vehicles had vanished, no headlights visible on either approach to Coyote Pass. Had she imagined them in her pain-induced state? Had the response team abandoned? A sharp crack announced the first real breach of her defenses, the reinforced windshield beginning to give way under repeated strikes from the sledgehammer. Spiderweb fractures spread across the specialized glass with each impact. Eleanor's eyes fell on the family photo secured to her dashboard, Michael in his Special Forces uniform, arm around her shoulders at his deployment ceremony. The last. In time she'd seen him alive. His voice echoed in her memory. When everything falls apart, remember your training, adapt, overcome, break through. A Diablo shouted triumphantly as the windshield finally shattered, raining polymer fragments across. The dashboard, Max immediately positioned himself between Eleanor and the breach, his combat stance leaving no doubt about his intentions for anyone who attempted entry. Viper appeared at the opening, gun aimed directly at the shepherd. "Call off your dog, Grandma, or I put him down right now." Blood loss had weakened Eleanor, but her eyes remained sharp, assessing. "You shoot him, and you'll never get me out of this cab alive." "We don't need you alive," Viper countered coldly. "Just out of the way." Eleanor saw the decision in his eyes before he acted. The subtle shift in muscle tension that telegraphed his intention to fire. "Max, down!" she commanded. The shepherd dropped instantly as the shot cracked through the cab, the bullet passing through the space where he had stood and embedding itself in the sleeper compartment behind. Eleanor used the moment to reveal what she'd retrieved earlier from the hidden compartment, a specialized taser designed for close-quarter defense. Before Viper could reacquire his target, she discharged it through the shattered windshield. The specialized barbs penetrated his leather jacket, delivering an incapacitating electrical charge that sent him convulsing backward into his men. The momentary advantage wouldn't last, but it created the distraction she desperately needed. "We need to move, Max," Eleanor told the shepherd, her strength waning as blood loss took its toll. Outside, the remaining Diablos regrouped quickly, their determination fueled by rage at seeing their leader incapacitated. Two climbed through the shattered windshield, while others continued attacking the trailer locks. Max launched himself at the first intruder, combat training evident in his precision as he clamped down on the man's weapon arm. Screams filled the cab as the shepherd executed the exact pressure needed to disable without permanently maiming. Eleanor struggled to reach the emergency ignition system, a backup designed to start the truck even under extreme conditions. If she could just get the massive rig moving, they might have a chance to break through the Diablo's blockade. Her vision blurred as blood loss and exhaustion took their toll. 90 years of grit could only compensate for so much physical trauma. "This is it, Max," she whispered as darkness threatened to overwhelm her consciousness. "We gave it our best." The second Diablo had cleared the windshield now, knife in hand as he advanced cautiously around his injured companion. Max released his first target to confront this new threat, blood staining his muzzle. That's when Eleanor heard it, the distinctive sound of suppressed firearms and bodies falling outside her truck. Professional, coordinated takedowns executed. "With military precision. Took you boys long enough," she murmured, as darkness finally claimed her vision. Consciousness returned to Eleanor in waves, each bringing sharper clarity. First came sounds, precise, controlled movements around her truck, then sensations, Max's warm presence still pressed protectively against her leg, the throbbing pain in her arm now properly bandaged. Finally, sight, her eyes opening to the glow of specialized medical equipment illuminating the cab. "Welcome back, Ma'am," said a voice beside her. A man in nondescript tactical gear was monitoring her vitals on portable medical equipment. No identifying patches or insignia, just the focused competence of someone with extensive combat medical training. "How long?" Eleanor asked, her voice surprisingly strong despite everything. 14 minutes since we arrived," the medic replied. "Your dog wouldn't let us near you until Commander Hayes talked him down." Eleanor nodded slightly, understanding. Max's training included specific protocols for allowing medical assistance only from authorized personnel. "Status?" she demanded. "Military brevity taking over. Perimeter secured. Hostiles contained." "Your shipment is intact," the medic reported efficiently. "Wound is non-critical. Field dressed with clotting agents and antibiotics." Through the shattered windshield, Eleanor could see precise, coordinated movement as black-clad figures secured. Diablo members with professional efficiency, no wasted motion, no unnecessary communication. The hallmarks of elite operators. A tall figure approached the truck, moving with the distinctive economy of someone who had led men in the world's most dangerous environments. Commander Alexander Hayes, Michael's former team leader, and the man who had promised to answer if Eleanor ever called that number. "Mrs. Lewis," Hayes acknowledged, climbing carefully through the damaged windshield. "Appears we arrived just in time." "Cutting it close, Commander," Eleanor replied, attempting to sit straighter despite the medic's gentle restraint. Hayes's expression remained professionally neutral, but respect showed in his eyes. "Your defensive measures were impressive. Most people wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes against a force that size. Most people haven't been driving dangerous roads since the Korean War," Eleanor countered, her gaze shifting to survey the scene outside. The Diablos had been completely neutralized, all members zip-tied and segregated into controlled groups, under guard, their weapons secured in neat piles, their vehicles disabled with precise mechanical interventions. The entire operation conducted with minimal noise and no collateral damage. Silent Guardians, the unofficial name for Hayes's specialized unit. Michael had served with them for 6 years before his final mission. "Your son taught Max those containment techniques," Hayes noted, observing the shepherd, who remained vigilant despite the secured environment. "Recognized them immediately. Michael said I'd need them someday," Eleanor confirmed. "He was always planning ahead." Hayes nodded once, acknowledgement between warriors who had both lost someone irreplaceable. "We've secured a medical transport for you. Doctor will meet us at the rendezvous point." "No," Eleanor stated flatly, reaching for the steering wheel to pull herself upright. "I'm delivering this shipment." "Mrs. Lewis, you've lost blood. You need—" "Those medications reach Phoenix Children's Hospital by morning," Eleanor interrupted, the steel in her voice unmistakable despite her physical condition. "I've never missed a delivery deadline in 70 years of driving. Not starting now." Max shifted position, sensing her determination and moving to support her effort to reach. The controls, the shepherd's training, allowed him to assist without hindering the medic's continued monitoring. Hayes studied her for exactly 3 seconds before making his decision. "Johnson, stabilize Mrs. Lewis for continued transport operation. Martinez, clear that windshield and secure a temporary cover." The team responded instantly, adapting their mission parameters without question. Elite operators recognized determination that matched their own when they saw it. Eleanor checked her truck systems while the medic adjusted her bandages and added another bag to her IV line. The massive diesel engine had remained idling throughout. The confrontation, another of Michael's modifications, ensuring the climate-controlled trailer maintained precise temperatures for the medical supplies. "Your protection detail will follow at distance intervals," Hayes informed her, all business now that the decision was made. "Martinez will ride second seat to monitor your condition." Eleanor shook her head. "Max rides second seat. Always." Hayes almost smiled, almost. "Understood. Martinez will follow in the lead vehicle." Outside, Eleanor watched with professional appreciation as the tactical team efficiently processed the scene. Evidence collected, prisoners secured in transport vehicles, communications equipment confiscated, the entire operation running with the precision that came from countless high-risk missions. "Diablos?" she asked as operators cleared the damaged windshield and applied a temporary polycarbonate cover. "Will face federal charges," Hayes responded. "The intelligence we've gathered indicates they're part of a larger pharmaceutical theft ring. Your tracking data will help dismantle their entire operation." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. The risk had been worthwhile, not just protecting her shipment, but stopping others from facing the same danger. As the team completed their preparations, Hayes approached one final time. "Michael would be proud, Mrs. Lewis. Not many people would have handled the situation with such tactical effectiveness." Eleanor's weathered fingers brushed the family photo on her dashboard. "Michael knew I could take care of myself. The phone was his way of making sure I didn't have to." Hayes nodded once, understanding perfectly. 30 minutes after the silent guardians had arrived, Eleanor's Peterbilt pulled back onto the highway, its massive engine rumbling with well-maintained power. The bullet hole in her arm throbbed despite the medication, but her hands remained steady on the wheel. Max had resumed his vigilant position in the customized co-pilot seat, his injuries treated and bandaged. In her mirrors, Eleanor could see the unmarked vehicles following at precise intervals, professional protection that would remain invisible to casual observation. Hayes' team adapting their elite skills to secure a 90-year-old truck driver and her critically important cargo. "Almost there, Max," she told the shepherd, as they emerged from Coyote Pass into the open desert. "Just like any other delivery. Except this one would have consequences that extended far beyond its immediate destination. The Diablos operation was compromised, their leadership captured, their tactics exposed, all because they had chosen the wrong truck to hijack." Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Phoenix Children's Hospital as Eleanor watched nurses carefully unload the last containers from her trailer. Despite her bandaged arm and the exhaustion etched into her face, she stood tall beside her truck, Max maintaining perfect vigilance at her side. "Every single medication accounted for, Ms. Lewis," Dr. Rivera confirmed, checking off the final items on her digital inventory. "You have no idea how many children will be alive tomorrow because these arrived on time." Eleanor nodded slightly, professional satisfaction outweighing her physical discomfort. "Just doing my job, Doctor. Most drivers would have rerouted after hearing about the Diablos targeting medical transports," Rivera noted, her eyes taking in Eleanor's bandaged arm and the battle damage to the Peterbilt. "Especially at your age. Most drivers haven't been on the road as long as I have," Eleanor replied simply. The hospital's loading dock bustled with activity, staff moving with urgent purpose now that the critical medications had arrived. None noticed the unmarked vehicle parked discreetly across the street, or the professional observers maintaining security perimeter. Hayes approached as the medical team finished their work, dressed now in civilian clothes that somehow still conveyed military bearing. "Federal task force has taken the Diablos into custody. Their entire Arizona network is compromised." "Good," Eleanor said, watching as the last of her cargo disappeared into the hospital. "They would have hit other drivers if we hadn't stopped them." "Not just stopped them," Hayes corrected. "The intelligence gathered from their communications equipment has compromised their entire multi-state operation. 17 pending hijackings have been prevented across the Southwest." Eleanor absorbed this information with quiet satisfaction. The risk had been worth more than just her single shipment. "Your truck is being transferred to our secure facility for repairs," Hayes continued. "Full restoration, including all specialized modifications." "I can handle my own repairs," Eleanor began, but Hayes shook his head slightly. "Michael's final request," he explained quietly. "If you ever had to use that number, we were to ensure you had everything needed to continue your work safely." Eleanor's weathered hand touched the family photo she'd transferred to her pocket when they'd evacuated. The damaged cab. Michael had always taken care of her, even after he was gone. "The company has a replacement Peterbilt ready," Hayes added. "Identical specifications, plus a few updates our technical team suggested. It's being delivered to your next pickup point." The hospital administrator approached, hand extended in gratitude. "Ms. Lewis, I can't thank you enough for what you've done. Those medications will save 37 children who had no other options." Eleanor accepted the handshake with dignity, her 90 years showing now in the stiffness of her movements. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the aches of age and injury. "I need to get moving," she told Hayes as the administrator departed. "Got another pickup in Tucson tomorrow morning." Hayes studied her with professional assessment. "You should rest, Mrs. Lewis, at least for a few days." Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. "I've been driving these roads since before you were born, Commander. I'll rest when my roots are covered." Max shifted beside her, his posture reflecting his handler's determination. The shepherd had been examined by the team's canine medic, his minor injuries treated with the same efficiency as Eleanor's. "More serious wound. At least accept a discreet escort for the next few shipments," Hayes negotiated, "until we've confirmed the remaining Diablo cells have been neutralized." Eleanor considered this compromise, recognizing the tactical wisdom. "Acceptable, if they maintain proper distance. I've got a reputation to protect." Hayes almost smiled. "Understood." As she prepared to leave, Eleanor noticed a group of truck drivers gathered in the hospital parking lot, having diverted from their routes when word spread about what had happened. At Coyote Pass, they stood respectfully as she emerged, a silent honor guard of road warriors acknowledging one of their own. "Steel Wheels," one nodded as she passed. The nickname had never been more earned. Eleanor climbed carefully into the temporary replacement truck provided by Hayes's team, Max taking his position in the co-pilot seat. The specialized harness accommodated his bandaged leg while maintaining his ability to respond if needed. "Your son's team is impressive," she told the shepherd as they pulled away from the hospital. "Might be nice having them check in occasionally." Through her mirrors, Eleanor watched the unmarked security vehicles fall into their escort pattern, professional operators maintaining protective coverage that would remain invisible to casual observation. The highway stretched before her as it had for 7 decades, a ribbon of possibility and purpose. Eleanor Steel Wheels. Lewis adjusted her mirrors, checked her gauges, and pointed her truck toward the next delivery. At 90 years old, with a wounded arm and a battle-tested shepherd beside her, she was exactly where she belonged. The Diablos had learned what others had discovered over the decades. Some legends aren't just stories. Some keep driving, no matter what tries to stop them.